Welcome everyone to our first Hunter Living History Showcase for 2024, our 21st year, and the first one we've had on a Tuesday, and we have our foundation member here, Freeman of the City of Newcastle, still existing.
Only just.
So I just want to acknowledge that we're meeting on the lands of the Awabakal people, and I just want to also make a comment about understanding the disappointments that Aboriginal people have felt over the last year and the voice to Parliament. I know there's a lot of mixed feelings in the communities about all this and whether acknowledgements really mean what we say they mean, but I just want to maintain that we have a commitment to making sure that we act in this place, and that we every year we've had concrete actions with regards to promoting Aboriginal culture and supporting Aboriginal people in our area. So I want to welcome many Aboriginal people here today and welcome them from wherever those lands are, and pay respect to their elders, past, present and ongoing. And we'd love to build that 50,000 year plan into everything we do. So there. So welcome to 2024. We have our presenter today is Ross Edmonds. He'll be speaking on Wilf Gould, a local preserver of Newcastle history, and also the Dangar book, which Ross purchased a number of years ago. Wilf Gould's collections basically form the heart of the City of Newcastle's archives and papers in the local studies area. So thank you very much. Ross, over to you.
Thanks, Jim. If I'm not talking loudly enough, can people indicate? Many people have made an important contribution to the history of Newcastle and the Hunter. Some of them are in this room, some of them are online, but I think Wilfred Gould, I'll just refer to him as Wilf, was second to none in his contribution. He was born in Birmingham in 1878, died in Newcastle Hospital in 1957. He migrated with his parents to Australia in 1881, so he was either only 2 or 3 years old when he arrived here. Unusually for that time, both his parents worked. His mother worked at David Jones, his father at Anthony Horton's. And later, they both went into their own retail business and were successful enough to send Wilf to Newington College. Now, I mean, most people didn't get to Newington College in the 19th century. Wilf excelled there in sport and also did very well academically. On leaving school, he became a travelling sales rep for Booths, which was a firm selling tea. In 1908, he became their sales rep in the Newcastle district, where he and his mother rented a cottage in Islington. Wilf attended the inaugural meeting of the Newcastle Surf Club, and later he was to become president and later still a life member. So that was one of his many interests. In his travels throughout the Hunter, Wilf developed a fascination with local history. In 1909, he joined the Royal Australian Historical Society in order to learn more about it and Australian history in general. He also began collecting books, pamphlets, photos and ephemera. Now, there are various theories about collectors, of which I'm one. You've either got that desire to accumulate this stuff or you don't. Some people are just happy to see the information, but other, I think, more unfortunate people feel they've got to own it. Anyway, and Wilf, luckily for us, was one of those people. To say that he was far-sighted and ahead of the game is an understatement. At this time, Australia's white history was so short that very few people took any interest in it, let alone collected material relating to it. And so at very little cost, he gradually built up a collection that was unsurpassed in its importance in this area. He also collected a wife, Ethel Buckingham. They were married in Newcastle in 1918 and eventually had 4 children. Look, I should mention that Gould, where we're talking about the man that did the books on birds and stuff, is spelled Gould, but this Wilf Gould is Goold. And I mean, you can get some information about him online. 1929, Wilf, at the age of 51, resigned from his job to run his own furniture retail business. He could not, of course, have chosen a worse time, 1929, as it marked the onset of the Great Depression. Wilf, however, was able to capitalise on the goodwill he'd built up in the Newcastle community over the previous 3 decades. And the new business prospered. In 1932, of course, when most businesses were putting off people, he was able to take on new staff. In 1933, he moved to larger premises on the corner of Hunter and Auckland Streets, roughly where New Space is now. 1934, he was elected to Newcastle City Council. I trust that he did a better job than the present one. Of course, I realise Hunter Living Histories is a non-political organisation, so it would be highly inappropriate for me to mention the fact that they've done a very poor job in terms of heritage and a lot of other things. So I won't dwell on that. In January 1936, he was instrumental in the formation of the Newcastle and Hunter District Historical Society and was elected its inaugural president, a position he continued to hold for a couple of decades. It was in this period that his collecting really took off, and people, knowing of his interest, often gave, sometimes sold him items of interest. For example, I'll mention now that in his will he left all of his collection to the Newcastle City Library, which had only just had that building in Layman Street opened. They have an almost complete set of NAG's Nautical Almanac that was published in Newcastle during the 1880s and 90s. I believe that, of course, it's impossible to collect that stuff now. I mean, hardly ever comes up for sale. But back in the 1920s and 30s and 40s, of course, Wilf was able to build up that collection. About 5 years ago, actually, I bought a single copy of a NAG's Almanac at Lawson's auction in Sydney. It only cost me about $200 as the filed-out map was missing. And as I went through it on the train on my way home, I discovered some stamps, and they were stamps of the Newcastle Library. So some awful person had stolen it at some stage, and I, being a worthy citizen, sold it back to the library at cost price. An intact copy sold recently at auction for about $1,000. Does anyone here or online own a copy of even one of NAG's almanacs? No, I guess the library here has some. Anyway, the family home of the Goulds was located at 56 Jumeric Street, Hamilton. and it included a large billiard room with billiard table. However, no one was ever able to play a game of billiards on it. This was stacked about 1/2 metre high with books and ephemera. In the words of one of his sons, Will spent nearly every night in the billiard room researching and writing on Newcastle and Hunter Valley history. Most of his writing later appeared as articles in the annual journal of the Newcastle District Historical Society, and a wealth of information. But those people who have consulted them know that, unfortunately, there is a serious problem. Wilf had no training as such in historical research, and so did not know that he needed to note his sources. Some of the information, though, is still quite useful, even though we've now got Trove, and so we can easily consult newspapers prior to 1955. But because Wilf was able to interview people who, of course, have passed on many decades ago. He handed over the management of his furniture business to his eldest son, also called Wilf, who had been a member of the RAF during World War II and who won a Distinguished Flying Cross in 1945. Not many people get one of those. Shows conspicuous bravery. Wilf's youngest son, Keith, was the Dux of Newcastle Boys High in 1944 and went on to gain an engineering degree from the University of Sydney. 1947 saw big celebrations in Newcastle for the sesquicentenary of Shortland's discovery of coal seams in the cliffs at Newcastle. Wilf took a prominent role in organising some of the events, including a display he mounted of historic books, paintings and ephemera. How I'd like to get my hands on some of them. Did you know that they also had a civic ball as part of the commemorations and was attended, anyone know? It was attended by the Governor-General. I don't know who the Governor-General was in 1947, but anyway, he was at the ball in the Newcastle Town Hall. Towards the end of his life, Wilf received many honours, such as the one from the Life Saving Association. The one that gave him the most satisfaction is said, well, according to his son, was the Fellowship of the Royal Australian Historical Society, which he joined as a young man 43 years earlier. 1956, he was involved in a minor collision with a double-decker bus. So, of course, you'd be showing your age, wouldn't you, Doug, if you could remember double-decker buses in Newcastle. He wasn't injured, but it shook him up, and at the end of the following year, he died in Newcastle Hospital. In his will, as I've said, he left his collection to the recently opened Newcastle Public Library, and I assume that as local historians, everyone has used it at some stage or another. Now, most of the journals over the first more than a decade, most of the articles are written by Wilf, but it's as a collector that he should be remembered, not as a historian. He recorded information, rarely was there any analysis. His approach to history was very narrow. He writes about old houses, old hotels, old personalities, etc. But where are the trade unions that were a feature of Newcastle in the second half of the 19th century and the first half of the 20th? The class conflict was such an important aspect of Newcastle during that time. Where is the conflict with the original inhabitants of the land? It simply isn't there. And of course this underlines, and of course most historians at the time weren't doing much better. I mean, there were some academic historians, of course, who were going further, but it underlines, I think, how far historiography has come, certainly in my lifetime. Look, to finish off, I mentioned that 2010, a man by the name of Charles Stitz published a volume on Australian book collectors. Now, Charles had been a lawyer in Melbourne, and I dare say most educated people in Melbourne have heard of Newcastle, but they're probably a bit vague about where it is. It certainly wouldn't have occurred to them that it would have any noteworthy book collectors. So I got in touch with Charles and pointed out that there were two people connected with Newcastle who deserved to be recognised, because by that stage his first book had been well received. He was going to put out another volume. Now, one of them was Roland Pope. Now, Roland Pope never lived in Newcastle, as you would know. I don't know if he ever even visited the place, but he built up an amazing collection of art and books. He was a wealthy man, and he was a real collector. And he didn't have any children to pass his collection on to. As great as his collection was, the Mitchell Library already had it all. And so he decided that he would look around. This is, I think Roland Pope died in 1945, so it's in the 40s. He's looking around for somewhere there was a cultural desert that was bereft of this kind of stuff. And of course, there was no better place than Newcastle. So as a result of my lobbying with Charles, there was an entry in the next volume about Roland Pope. I also explained to him the death that not just Nova Castians, but other people owed to Wilf Gould. And so I sent him some information, but he got in touch with some of Wilf's grandchildren and got a lot more information. And so there's an article in this volume 2 about Wilf Gould that I'm proud of the fact that I was able to include those two men in it. Now, okay, questions? Comments?
I have a fun fact for you. That was very interesting. Thank you so much. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
So I did my Year 10 work experience at Gould's in that beautiful 2-story space that they had. And at the time, that seems strange to me even now, but they had planned to do architecture or interior design at university. So that was the best thing the school could come up with at the time to support me in doing something that was of value. But they were very proud of, they had a chair there that Queen Elizabeth had sat in when she had made her visit to Newcastle. I have no idea what happened to that chair, but it had quite a place when you walked into the space. Yes, so I think it was up for sale, even still, but it was something that was noted when I did that week's work with them. So.
And was Gould still operating then, wasn't it?
In the mid-80s, yeah.
Okay.
So I remember the building.
So I did it in 83, yeah.
Okay.
It was a lovely building, yeah.
Well, all my furniture came from Gould's. Remember them very well. And that building was really a hall where you could have drama, or with a high.
Yes, it had like some mezzanine.
Yes, a
Yes,
mezzanine.
it was a little bit like a
Theatre. It was a real theatre.
space.
Yeah, a little theatre. Yeah, great.
It was almost Art Deco-ish, I think, in its facade from memory. But we're going back a very long time.
Ross, Paul Walsh here. I'm only saying that because I'm coming up as user on the screen, which some people might find amusing. Can you guys hear me in there? A couple of comments. Ross, I thought Godfrey would be proud of you in the sense that I thought you were emulating Cicero in those political remarks that you weren't making earlier during the presentation.
Thank you, Paul. Yes, I know I was more than a little naughty.
Yes, I could feel the spirit of Godfrey arising in the room. But I thoroughly enjoyed the presentation, and I, as usual, I learnt things that I was not conscious of. But another book that I just wanted to mention that I found in the local history section, and I don't know whether it was part of Gould's collection or not. I found it in the local history section in Newcastle Library when I was doing Novocastrian Tales. And I used one extract from it in the book, and that was Historical Records of Newcastle by John Windross and J.P. Ralston in 1897. It was published.
Yes.
So I'm not quite sure whether it links in with his collection, but I found it a thoroughly interesting and inspiring publication about Newcastle. And I wanted to do them a service by putting it in Novocastrian Tales because 100 years before me, they had done that one. So just thought I'd mention that in the sense of that particular collection at Newcastle Local History section at the library. But thanks, mate. I thoroughly enjoyed the presentation, and I'll give you regards to Godfrey when I see him one of these days.
Thanks, Paul. I appreciate that.
See, the point you bring up, Paul, is interesting because that Ralston Historical Records of Newcastle came in the centenary of the founding of Newcastle.
Yes.
In 1897. And prior to that, you had John Bingle's Historical Records of Newcastle, which was his sort of attempt at bringing together important documents. There's been this real sort of quest to try and pull together this material. And before Wilfred Gould, you've got J.J. Maloney operating out of the Longworth Institute, which was also like a museum, library, archive and gallery that basically fell apart. His timing was perfect because 1957 was around about the time that they built the War Memorial as a cultural centre. Did you bring that up at one of your discussions? Someone brought up the fact that we dedicated our cultural centre as a war memorial, to honour that sort of belief in learning as a way of avoiding war. I guess you could say that the work that we're continuing here is a similar sort of thing of trying to bring together material and safeguarding them. But at the time that Wilfred Gould was collecting his material, Newcastle had no repository and had no archival institution. It was the AA Company records going to Canberra that really caused a bit of a fracas in that we needed a place for these historic records to be kept safely. And since that time, we've had the cultural centre in town. We've also had the university, but there still is a great need for the region to really take its history seriously. I was always warned with Gould, you got to double check everything. Because he wasn't, as Ross said, he wasn't a professional historian, and so he was a great collector of material and transmitter of knowledge through the journal of the Newcastle and Under District Historical Society, but everything has to be cross-checked and verified because, as you said, he didn't leave any sources. So
we didn't have public libraries until when?
Well, they were 1930s. I mean, we've got
as early as
we've
that.
got the account of Pommytown.
Oh yes.
William Claridge. He's talking there. He's coming from England as a boy, and he knew more about Newcastle than he said the children he did. And he said the poverty wasn't only just in the fact that they didn't have shoes. It was the mental poverty of not having a public library, because those kids in England could just go down to the public library and learn all about Newcastle. But when he got here, the real poverty was the poverty of the mind. So it's interesting. We've got his original manuscript of that in Pommytown years. So it all links in, and all this work is really important. So thank you very much, Ross. Any other questions from the Zoom world? All right, well,
can I just mention, of course, Newcastle had the School of Arts,
Yeah.
but they were pretty limited. They had their libraries, and it's not just the Newcastle one. There was one at Wickham, but it only lasted for about 25 years.
Yeah.
Then, of course, there was the one in Elder Street, Lambton, where the building is still there.
Mechanics Institute, yep.
Yeah.
And the question you've got to ask yourself is what happened to the collections? Where did they end up?
Yes.
So that happens.
Ross, if you look on the window at Lambton, you can see the price, the annual price of reading, mate. It was something like 2 shillings and 6pence.
Yes. So on that note, I mean, I had an inquiry from one of the researchers here as to where W.J. Enright's papers and collections ended up. So I know that W.J. Enright Solicitors is still practicing in Maitland. They might know, and solicitors have got a wonderful pedigree of looking after records, but it's interesting to know where his records have ended up, especially because they recorded so much local Aboriginal content. So if anyone's got any ideas, I've sent through as many leads as we can, including that of his grandson that's still around in Maitland. So we're always trying to track down these caches of papers. Another one was Dr. Sussmilch, I think his name is. He was head of geology at the School of Arts, I think. And also there's a brief news report that he had uncovered one of the early tool making sites at Shepherd's Hill. But all we've got is the news report. So another researcher trying to track down his papers. With a surname like that, I don't think, if there's any family descendants out there. But we're always on the hunt to find where these long lost.
I've never been in the library there, but at the big lawyer's firm in Honeysuckle, what's the name of it? I've forgotten the name, but even though I had them,
I know.
and my daughter worked for them for a while. I know.
I've got the library downstairs.
Yeah, and they have a very big, that was, my colleagues had talked very, very well about the library, the historical library done by one of the partners in the law firm.
I remember him saying.
Belmore, Helmore.
Spark
Yes,
Helmore.
yes, Spark Helmore. See, and
Basil Helmore.
Dear Basil was.
Basil Helmore.
He
Well,
was-
school. Basil. I love these names. What happened to these names?
Basil was a great member of the Parks and Playgrounds movement with Joe Ridgely and his friends.
Anyway,
I'll just pass a few of these around. I know probably everyone here has seen them, so,
The other was,
but there might be a few that.
you mentioned the NAG's almanacs. It would be fantastic to see whether the actual large plans are in those ones in the city of Newcastle, because we've digitised all of the ones that we've got in our collection from about 1880 to 1895. So they really show the transformation of Newcastle, especially Stockton, from bushland to a streetscape. I mean, they're great. Sort of, and they've also been very good with the topography of the landscape to help piece together what the Aboriginal landscape was like. So it's very good with clues as to where the ancient dune ran, and so you can really start to reconstruct early, land use patterns for the last, few thousand years from those maps, because they record streetscapes, but also the topography. So if anyone wants to sticky beak in there, I'd be very interested to know, and compare the NAGS scans that we've got on the Hunter Living Histories site in iRes. Anyway, thank you very much, Ross.
Now, I want to say a few words about Dangar.
Okay.
Look, it's about 15 years ago. Johnny and I were talking about some of the rare books in the special collections here, and someone mentioned the fact that the book that had cost them the most money was the one that Henry Dangar wrote, published in 1828. And when I found out a bit more about the book, I thought, oh yes, I'd like one of those. I kept an eye online for about 15 years, and eventually one came up, not online, but in a catalogue of burglaries. And I'll just read out their entry about it. It says, the full name is the Index and Directory to the map of the county bordering upon the River Hunter, the lands of the Australian Agricultural Company, with the ground plan and allotments of Kingstown. Now, most of you, I think, will know that for a fairly brief period of time, Newcastle wasn't called Newcastle. It was called Kingstown. But
Coal River.
Yes, but they eventually came back to Newcastle.
Newcastle on Tyne.
It says, with a view of the present state of agriculture in the colony, the whole forming a complete emigrant's guide, published in London, 1828. Anyway, and this one included the armorial bookplate of Rodney Rouse Dangar. So it's coming from having that provenance made the book even more desirable. And it says a contemporary pencil inscription on the flyleaf states, excessively rare and valuable. This is one of the early Australian books which comes into the market about once in a generation. So Henry Dangar, born 1796, died 1861, surveyor and pastoralist, was born in Cornwall, England. He was the first of 6 brothers to emigrate, arriving at Sydney in 1821. He was appointed assistant surveyor of lands and surveyed the Camden and Argyll counties before being transferred to Newcastle, where he surveyed Newcastle and the Hunter River district. Look, my apologies to people who already know this, but he surveyed the Hunter River area extensively, opening up new areas for settlement, because ignoring the fact that there had been people living on that land for quite a while prior to that. After being dismissed from his position after a dispute concerning a land grant to himself and his brother William, Dangar returned to England and wrote the Index and Directory to the map. Now, the map is a huge
It's online now.
thing. Okay, yes, thank you.
That's a smaller scan. There's a 47 megabyte scan as well.
Now, a lot of the early books about Australia are not that rare. The question is, why is this one so rare? Well, it's because the book came with the map and it cost 5 guineas. Now, 5 guineas in those days, an ordinary nice book cost 5 shillings. But so at the cost of 5 guineas, there was only wealthy people that could ever buy it. Apparently, the MacArthurs at Camden have a copy, well, of the map. I don't know if the book's still there, but this goes on to say that there are only 2 known copies of the map in Australia. Well, it turns out now there are 3, and because the Newcastle Museum managed to get one that had turned up at an op shop. But anyway, getting back to the book, it said it was written for the guidance of immigrant settlers in the Hunter River district. Dangar held out to settlers the prospect of occupying alluvial lands adjoining the Hunter River, rich without parallel in the known parts of the colony, but little inferior to the most improved English meadows. It also set out a ground plan and allotments for Newcastle, at which he writes there were not more than 30 private houses in Newcastle and the population, excluding the government mining establishment, no more than 200. So at this time, the coal mines of Newcastle were worked directly by the government, by convicts. So Berkelow's, of course, weren't selling the book cheaply, but I thought this is the only chance.
Berkeley is selling something cheaply.
Yes, they weren't. So I thought this is I better not hesitate. So I rang them and got it. Now it turned out that it was
How much for? Is that too rude a question to ask?
well. Look, if people want to just in their heads think of a number of what the book may have cost. If you're thinking of anything under 1,000, it means you don't have a clue. If you're thinking of 1,000, you're very much on the right track as long as you put another naught after that. And it turns out the question is, what are these rare books worth? Well, booksellers have a saying: it's worth what someone will pay for it. And I know of someone who's got a lot more money than me, who was just slightly disappointed and annoyed that I'd seen Berkelow's catalogue before he did, because he said he'd have bought it himself. But going back to the 1990s, now people can see this book here called The Nobby's Collection by Kevin Brown, Mark Jurish.
We have a copy of that.
Yes.
Mining engineers.
Yeah, so
Lots of money.
and they built up an amazing collection of mainly artworks, which was on display here in Newcastle in, I think, about 1993, but also of books that showed images of Newcastle. And the Henry Danger book does have a fold-out view of Newcastle. I think it was probably based on Lycett's view from 10 years earlier. But the fact that I know that my book is this one is because of the bookplate in it from Rodney Rouse Stanger. Now, just as an aside, there was an issue raised maybe about 10 years ago, a bit more. Yes, that's the image there. About Dangar Park, whether the name should be changed, because as most people would know, it was on Dangar's property, Mile Creek, where a massacre of Aboriginal people took place. And Henry Dangar, along with some of the other pastoralists at the time, took up a petition saying that those men should not be put on trial. Now, I don't know how they tried to justify the massacre of unarmed Aboriginal people.
But he himself had nothing to do with it. It was his the fellow in charge.
Yes, I mean, Henry Dangar wasn't there at the time, but he was one of the people that supported that petition. And therefore, his memory's got to live with that. But the point about Dangar Park in Mayfield is that it wasn't named after Henry Dangar at all. It was named. Henry Dangar ended up being a very rich man, and all of his sons inherited quite a bit of land and money. One of them was Albert Augustus Dangar. It was he that donated the land for the Wickham School of Arts and the land for Dangar Park. I think there may have been other things as well. Now, I just want to mention something. And so there's a Dangar Street, for example, in Armidale. But I think that was probably named after Henry Dangar's brother, William Dangar, because William Dangar owned land not far from Armidale. Some of my ancestors worked on one of his properties. But anyway, one of the son, Albert Augustus Dangar, was a principal in a Cobar copper mine with William Longworth, who is known locally, and they made a lot of money. I haven't done much research on Albert Augustus, but it appears to me that he had a sense of humour. Having been called Albert Augustus, apparently he liked the alliteration. So he went on to have, well, numerous children. And I'll start off with the name. Well, the oldest one is the one that owned that book of mine, Rodney Rouse Stanger. Now, Rouse, Albert, his wife was Mary Phoebe Rouse, and Rouse Hill in Sydney was named after her grandfather. And so that was also a wealthy family. So obviously with money, you try and keep it in the family. But carrying on the alliteration, Phyllis, what do you think her second name was? Now, it's Phoebe. Now, Norman is Norman Napier. Clive, Collingwood. And then you have Grace Gladys. And so carrying on in this tradition, I mean, my name's Ross, I would have to be, well, possibly Ross Rufus, you know. Gianni could be Gianni Giuseppe or, Keith could be Keith Ken or someone. The next one is Flora Fahan. Then you have Dora Dagmar. You have Grace Geraldine. Harold, now I want you to guess this one. It's got, the clue is 1066. So it's Harold.
Second. Hastings.
Yes, Harold Hastings. So then you have Maud Marion. Last is Elsie Eleanor. So has anyone ever come across anything like this? A family where, so it's just an interesting little bit of trivia. Anyway,
Sympathies for the wife.
yes, I don't know how his wife felt about this, because, just getting back to Danger's book, there are 2 known copies in England. There are 5, maybe 6 in libraries in Australia, because as I've mentioned, one of them is here. And there are 2 in private hands. So obviously I've got one, and some of you may remember this university, he's got the other one. All right, any questions, any suggestions about naming children?
Well, we'll just suggest that you're a great namer of children then. All right.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much for that addenda to your talk, Ross. Okay, so the other, we've got some updates. Joe, did you want to talk about the 50th anniversary of the Open Foundation?
Yes.
How many people here went through Open Foundation?
Now he's a PhD in research in clinical psychology. He's adopted into Open Foundation in Newcastle.
Did you want to say a few words?
Yes, I'm very happy to share that I'm a staff member of the university. I work in the Pathways and Academic Learning Support Centre, which used to be the Old English Language and Foundation Studies Centre. In 1974, with a cohort of 80 students, Open Foundation kicked off, and this year we celebrate 50 years, and we are putting together a wonderful exhibition and commemorative book called 50 Years, 50 Stories, where we're recruiting 50 former students, Johnny being one of them, to share a little bit about their journey from that moment where they had access to education and were able to make great choices in their lives for what they would become, what they would do next, how they would give back, etc. So working with Anne, hopefully to build a living history site that shares a lot of the memories and archival materials, if we can, fingers crossed.
And with the working president and student involved.
Yes, and Isabel is one of our Feature 50 students, also last year's Vera Deacon intern. So we are using a snowballing word of mouth approach to getting 50 former students because
Jude can't see your face. Went to the camera and say hi.
we're
Walk out the front.
Oh, sorry, yes, I'm a voice from nowhere. So yes, so anyway, very exciting project to be working on, and such a wonderful legacy of the university, and the program has impacted tens of thousands of people who've gone on to do amazing things.
Yeah, I'd love you to interview my nephew.
Well,
He works in Christchurch, New Zealand.
Oh,
and,
see, and that is one of the tricks, because we have to take a portrait and a story. So we are a little limited in terms of accessibility. Yes, we're probably going to end up with people who are still in and around the Hunter and the Central Coast.
I'm going to his wedding at the end of March,
Oh,
actually.
okay. Well, you can tell him that we're celebrating 50 years, and he is one of the recipients of that wonderful legacy. So yes, really remarkable achievement that the university committed back in 1974 to opening up access to higher education, and yeah, we should be very proud of that.
Thank you very much, Joe.
Yeah, right.
Wonderful. All right. So we've got another anniversary. Oh, sorry, Doug, did you have a question to ask?
Oh, no, Nerita's daughter,
Yes.
Charlotte, it came through there, and she's doing very well in
Very good.
her studies.
Yes, wonderful. And I think I know Nerita. She used to work at the university, yes, so.
So yeah, it's one of the biggest impactful things the university's
It is.
done, I think.
It's really good, yes. And
Yes, we've also got the 75th anniversary of the School of Education. Is that this year?
It is. I know Hela is online.
Hi, how are you?
Good. I'm not sure whether there's something you want to briefly mention.
Yeah. I'm happy to do that if you'd like to. So actually what we're celebrating this year is the 75th anniversary of education in Newcastle, whether that's at the Teachers College or now the University of Newcastle. And at the moment, we're hoping to, well, we will work with Anne Hardy and her team to get a project running, but I will also be calling out for stories as well, because we're hoping by the end of the year to put together a booklet, hard copy and soft copy of people's stories of alumni, notable alumni, and community alumni as well. So if people are interested in being involved with this project, please reach out to me. My name's Heather Sharp at the University of Newcastle in the School of Education. I'm easy to find on email. And I look forward to hearing from you. Was there anything else I should say, Anne?
I have two sisters who went through education, Teachers College, so I will give you their name.
Cool. Sorry, I don't know who's speaking.
Sorry, that's Joe. Sorry, we're
Just
Hi, Joe.
I'm the 50 years of pals.
Oh, great. Yep. Okay. Thanks, Joe. That would be good
Johnny.
to know their names.
Johnny, it's Ron Barber.
Yep.
In your collection, haven't you got all the Alcharingas?
Yes.
College magazine? Yeah.
And I think they're online too, through
Yes.
Living Histories,
They are.
the outer ringers, including the large format ones that came later in the 70s.
Yeah.
I think they're all there. Yeah, they're all there.
Yeah.
We can't hear you, Ron.
Sorry, large format ones. I still have mine from the 63, 64.
Yep. And we've got a lot of records from the Teachers College, because recently when we had to do the research for Wallatuka's 40th, that began on the other side, the Teachers College side, and we were able to find a lot of early papers. So even though we weren't under the same jurisdiction until 1989 when everything came together. So that's something to remember, Heather, if you just keep that in mind.
Well, I'm very annoyed that the film that I made when I was at Teachers College in 58.
What was that film, Doug?
It was the
He says
intercollegiate, and it was of the march they had down Hunter Street and all sorts of things. But it was lodged with the library at the Teachers College. It went to the library over here and it's disappeared.
Where library over here, what do you mean, Huxley Library? Or?
Yes,
Okay.
Yeah, Huxley Library.
And it's disappeared?
Yes, from there.
What was it called, Doug?
Hmm?
What was it called?
So long ago. I mean, it was the intercollegiate with Wagga Wagga.
Intercollegiate?
Yes, the
Wagga Wagga.
Newcastle Teachers College.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you never know, it might have ended up in the collection
68.
somewhere.
It was
It
a
might be in
great,
that room upstairs.
great
you
week.
know.
And I just took lots of.
You filmed that?
The film was done in 16 millimetre size.
Okay. Well, we'll keep an eye out for it.
Yeah.
You probably.
Yeah, we're hoping that this project with this team is another opportunity for work-ready student
Yeah.
to, even bring together what's already online
Yeah.
through our archives, reach out to the community.
Yeah.
Just to sort of
So
support.
that's what this
project.
discussion is about, is just coursing from university, community, business, what sort of things are going on this year that you want help with.
Yeah.
So we did a bit of a hit list of, who would you like to hear from? Are there any experts in the field or inspiring people you want us to draw in? What sort of things do you want digitised? Well, obviously education related material would be something important. Find Doug's film, if we can, and digitise it. Well, with a name like Intercollegiate Wagga Wagga, it might be easy to find. So we'll have a look at, because there's lots of reels of stuff to go through that we don't know, the source or where it's come from. Think about your town and regional communities, what they need. Are there any commemorations going on? Public advocacy. At the end of last year, we had a number of groups, heritage groups, have come in conflict with the new housing sort of regime. So we've obviously got a housing problem, that we don't have enough housing to put people in. But solving a problem of poor planning with more poor planning is not going to fix the issue. So I know that we have the Institute for Regional Futures that is talking to industry about this. We have the School of Architecture that is trying to do the design components of what it could look like. We've had presentations from people involved with the Broadmeadow project, the Mile Creek Bushland, Walker Waterworks, and also the law, people in business and law. So, and we've also got the National Trust, the Regional Committee of the National Trust that's involved on the ground. So there's something around those sorts of things that we might be able to pull together. Not necessarily to get political, but to act as some kind of catalyst to help that debate. Because, there's a house in Mayfield that was the original home of T.A. Bray. The local residents are complaining because they want to bulldoze out and build a 3-storey apartment thing there. So there's sort of this knee-jerk reaction. We want to house people, absolutely, but we don't want to bulldoze every single natural environment and every single heritage thing. To fix a problem that's been decades in the making as well. So that's where UON professional expertise can really play in. Commemorations, anniversaries, wish lists. Series 2 of the Stories of Our Town is in production now. Their first film on Nobbies is currently underway. They're doing another one on Val Blackett. She was a 17-year-old gunner who protected Newcastle during World War II. There's one on the wine industry, one on Newcastle shipwrecks, and another one they'd like to make on Ralph Snowball and his legacy, his photographic collection. But I think they need some some investment in that one to get that done. But that would be a fantastic one because Ralph Snowball's images are really important. Then the whole idea of Aboriginal truth telling. We've got a Waitako collaboration that Dr. Amir Mogadam has organised with, well, we've been actually asked to co-partner in with these Maori scholars, which has been a great honour, to have a look at how narratives, how Indigenous and Aboriginal First Nations people, as well as Maori students, contend with colonial narratives and just the information that goes through universities. So is that right, Amir? You might have read that right. We've got Professor Kate Senior with Nagore to Newcastle ARC grant with the Stan Masterson Archives. Given the Voice result last year, Newcastle voted yes, that was great, few, but a lot of regions in our area and at the Central Coast voted no. So we're really thinking about getting involved with those communities and creating tailor-made resources like we did for Newcastle, but Aboriginal Aberdeen, Aboriginal Dungog, connecting as much of the historical sort of blanket lists that are held down in New South Wales state records to those particular areas, so people don't have to go digging too far through. These are all ideas, mind you, but they're things that we can involve our students and communities in doing. So have a think about those. And if you've got any ideas, just throw them in right now or send them through to us. And as we start formulating things, because I think it's really wonderful for the students to be involved in these real world things. I mean, it's been the feedback from us. What do you reckon? You know, Isabel with the new surname. No, you know, no reviews are great. Okay, Isabel Whittle.
I do, can I just
Got
say
Sarah.
something, Johnny? It's, I have a church, a former church on the Allen River, which is turning 100 this year.
Okay.
And it's the small community of Eccleston, which is just beyond East Gresford. We purchased it the year before last and we're doing some more work on it. But I have promised the community at the last year's RFS Christmas party that I would try and host some kind of a community event so that they can come onto the grounds and, you know, just have a picnic day or whatever. But at that point, I also want to try and gather up some of the local history. I don't know what method I should use, whether I should do some kind of a, you know, oral history project or some kind of, because I know people will have photos and things, and whether they entrust them to me so that I can have them scanned. But I think early on I'd sent you because there's a picture of it on the Living Histories in the archive saying, I just bought this church and I really want to do something for the community. So anyway,
No, that's good. We'll see even on the 20th of this month, Yalawar is having its 25th anniversary. So Paul, did you want to mention anything about that or?
Well, a big thank you and a big shout out to you and Anne and all your work through Living Histories, because as the three of us know, but others may not, without the catalyst of Gianni and Anne working with us, this birthday celebration, you know, may have been in doubt, but it is a tremendous event, and we thank Hunter New England Health for all their organisation for it. And they are, as you know, Gianni, through a little bit of inspiration, they've committed to restoring and renewing the entire Yalawar site for the future. And I just say a big thank you to Living Histories for your absolute role as a catalyst in all of that. And I think it shows how Living Histories literally is living and makes things happen if we put great creative minds and people of historic consciousness together. My second comment is really an addendum to Ross's previous addendum, and it sort of links to a couple of things you just said, Gianni. In my travels, I went to Dengar's property, Ross, and an Aboriginal elder took me down through the bush to where the Aboriginal community believed the massacre actually occurred. And I can say that we sat there together, and that in that space, history still lives, because you could feel a tremendously eerie, spirit-filled feeling in that place. And when you were talking about Henry Dengar before you mentioned Mile Creek, that's what came up for me. So it sort of shows you the power of living history, literally in the title of this initiative, I feel is very real. So I just throw that one in, and thank you for your listening to me.
Involved in a commemoration at Mile Creek, weren't you, many years ago? Paul, was that you?
Yeah, I attended the inauguration of the Mile Creek Memorial, and I wrote the articles for that, like for the Newcastle Herald, etc. And yeah, it was a very interesting journey that Mike Scanlon and I and Simone de Peek, the photographer, went on up into Bingra is the place nearby, and I don't think Mike would mind me sharing this one, but when we sat in our hotel room and we were reading the usual tourist information about the place, because we hadn't really been there before, there was an interesting phrase about Aboriginal people choosing that they didn't have a problem with racism in the area because Aboriginal people chose not to live there, which was, it just shows you a bit of context in terms of evolving consciousness, I suppose, of our past, and reality and truth-telling versus possible well-intentioned denial or whatever. Yeah, I didn't come back from that journey the same person, really, but mainly because of that shared journey with the elder into the bushland, just the two of us. It certainly brought it home out of the books. So I read a lot of the material about the Mile Creek massacre and the trial, etc., because I knew I was going to be writing the articles. But there is a big difference, obviously, as we all know, between reading it and actually going and experiencing the site and the kind of consciousness that site tends to project. Well, it certainly did to me anyway, while I was sitting there on the edge of the creek. So that's it from me, really.
Thanks, Paul. And another spin-off from that has been the memorial in Carrington Park.
That's true. We actually, thanks for mentioning that. We just had our second meeting of the.
So you involved, John?
I was invited that Richard's the delegate, but he couldn't make that meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, we just had our second meeting at the park. And we put forward, Susan and I put forward certain suggestions that ACON have received well, and ACON are doing a great job. And I suspect what's going to happen is ACON, through that committee, are going to come up with a master plan for the park, including a landscape plan, and have meetings with our old friends at Newcastle City Council. Might need you there, Doug, to preserve the park, because what we've all noted, and what was noted at our meeting, because I got the team to go and walk around, is that the War Memorial gates and section directly across the road there, after you go over the Cowper Street Bridge, for those who don't know where it is at Carrington, is incredibly well looked after, as it should be. But when you look at the memorial park for all the people who died from AIDS in the Hunter region, directly across the road, it's incredibly neglected and often overgrown, and obviously does not get appropriate council attention. So we believe there's a great halfway plan whereby we can enter into a kind of not partnership, but liaison relationship with council, where the volunteers perhaps do 3 or 4 annual gardening cleanups and plantings, etc., and where the council get on with doing the normal mowing and maintenance that should happen, as happens across the road. Now once again, I hate to keep shining everybody, but Anne and Gianni played a pivotal role through Living Histories in bringing the right people together to actually make this happen. And I think it's wonderful. And ACON actually did have the 2 stars memorial plaque that went missing. ACON have it in their safekeeping, and it will be reinstalled on the site. The other thing we can note for everybody is originally we were able to give ACON, Susan and I gave ACON recently an article with Judith Gatlin in it, who was one of the grieving parents who founded the park. Basically, in that article, it jogged my memory. Apparently, we planted about 20 fig trees, and I'm pleased to say that 10 of them have survived and are really have in that 25 years or so. Is it, Susan, the time span? Since 2001, isn't it? It's a bit. Yeah. Well, anyway, the fig growth has been great on the 10 specimens, including the Tree of Love, which has its own plaque. And I think we can see where the gaps are, where those that didn't survive. But yes, we're looking at really holistically, perhaps rebadging the park and really making it an attractive place to come, so that people can actually honour the lives of the people who died. Our book and the park were all about the celebration of life rather than mourning the loss. It was about the celebration of the actual lives of the people involved. And I guess I'll just leave it there, guys.
Thank you. Do you have anything to add, John?
No, I'm seeing Richard in about half an hour.
Okay.
And I'll pass on the news. Couldn't make it that meeting.
I can't see you, John, because you're like a little mini-me to me at the moment, but hello from me.
Up to the camera there.
I've just got a text message from Milo at ACON for free, so I'll do that. But Richard Riley will be here shortly for another meeting, so I'll talk to him.
Yeah, I sent Milo a little précis of what we were chatting about in the park the other day, and he might want to share that with you, mate.
Okay. So they're the kind of things that, we can get involved with and get the wheels back on. And also the example helps to inform people working on similar projects now. So I know that the Institute for Regional Futures is involved, and the university is building student accommodation at the moment in town. They want Aboriginal people to feel welcome in these places, and the example of what happens with the formation of these things and how the wheels can fall off in 25 years and get put back on is a good example of the sort of story arc of what to prepare for when taking on these projects. So does anyone have any other ideas that
It's a good reminder the catalyst in full caps and bold should be in Anne Hardy and Gianni De Gravio's professional qualifications. Just mention that.
All right. So, all right, think about them, send in your ideas, and you've got some events that are going on at the moment.
Just a few updates I thought I might just quickly share, and they're also on the blog. But there's an exhibition of What Space, and there's some fantastic engravings from the time of Rembrandt, along with Woodrow, who used to be a lecturer in fine art here at the uni. That exhibition's until the 2nd of March, but it's truly quite amazing works. I think the earliest dating to 1499, original engravings. And there's a book launch coming up on the 9th of March. No, not the, 9th of March. It's the Chronicles of Carrington, Tarlee and Legacy of the AA Company that Johnny mentioned earlier. That was a bit of a catalyst, the library coming to Newcastle. So that company was founded 200 years ago. This is like the first of the events of a book that is going to be launched that was written by Janice Wynne. That's up at Tea Garden, so I've just held a link to the invitation. So anyone's welcome to go to that. And then tonight we've got Dr. Jude Conway, who's with us today. Presenting.
Who rescued your plaque, I think. Jude, is that you?
Hang on.
She rescued the plaque from the park.
So Jude's talking tonight at the Newcastle Family History Society. You can Zoom in or attend. And Jude's talking about Newcastle woman Dr. Ethel Byrne and her life as a physician here in Newcastle. Jude, do you want to add anything else to that at all? No? And downstairs in special collections, we've got the Homegrown in the Hunter exhibition that is still on, I think, for a couple of weeks. It's a fantastic exhibition that was curated by some of our staff in special collections that has selected images relating to that celebrates food and stories that relate to the hunter. And again, we've got another commemoration this year, the sesquicentenary of Wallsend as a township suburb. And that's coming up in August, but we'll sort of leave that on the agenda. And yeah, the AA company, there'll be a series of events throughout the year. And I think that's about it.
Okay. Does anyone have any updates from their groups? Ron, John?
I just wanted to say that I've been asked to open an exhibition called Pink Bands at Hunter Workers. It's an exhibition from Sydney, from the Sydney Trades Hall, and it's about gays in trade unions and using gays as it's a 1970s thing. It's something I'm in two minds about, the exhibitions and opening it, because there was mutual hostility on both sides, both the trade union movement and the university-based gay groups. And this, it's very hard to sort of stick lipstick on a pig, or glitter on the shit. I don't know, but anyway, we've come to stick still. We do have an interview with Danny Dodd on our website, and that interview details how Danny got arrested by the police, and somebody took the news clipping from the Newcastle Herald and sent it down to the boss of the Marine Stewards Union. I didn't think, as I read the interview, as I listened to him, I didn't see the significance of that, but the significance just dawned on me that particularly union was a closed shop, and so by sending a newspaper clipping to the union secretary, Danny could have lost his job. They could have just taken his ticket off him and he couldn't get it. So the union could have worked against him, but the union didn't, and the union stood by him, and he continued to work from Newcastle. He didn't go anywhere else. So that was a good thing, and it's about the only thing we can dig up from Newcastle at the present time. There is obviously many more, but whether people will want to talk about them, that's another thing. There is, as I said, a mutual suspicion and antagonism between the two groups. In old days, we tried to get a talk in Sydney in the Waterside, a meeting of the Waterside Workers Federation, and to talk about gay liberation and waterside workers. It seems ridiculous now, but anyway.
Marriage made in heaven.
Marriage made. But you see, the Waterside Workers was a communist union, and they supported. They didn't support gay rights, and this is a common pattern. Gay rights was one of those issues that is not a workplace issue. Either gays and lesbians aren't working class, or that the issues that they have aren't workplace issues. So, so the explanation we got from the secretary of the Waterside Workers Federation was that waterside workers wouldn't be interested in it. It's not important to their lives. Anyway, I took up that challenge, and that's another story. But it was a move by a few of us to break out of the university gay movement and actually get involved in actual workers encourage workers to join their trade unions and break down the antagonism. So the exhibition is based a lot on the work that I did in the 80s. They've just used all of my newsletters and graphics to illustrate it. I don't know how it'll go down, but I'll keep you informed. There'll be a meeting before the opening.
Okay.
Thanks.
Great, thanks for the update. Jude?
Yeah, I've got everything working now. I'd just like to say about my talk tonight, Dr. Ethel Byrne was the first woman doctor at Newcastle Hospital from 1918. And she was the first woman doctor at Rankin Park TB Hospital, which opened in 1947. She was the first doctor there. So, and interestingly, she died the same year as Wilf Gould Ross in 1957. And also, I'd make brief mention of Dr. Lucy Gullett, who donated 1,000 books, I think it was, to Newcastle Library in 1951, and link and make a possible link between her and Dr. Ethel Byrne. So yeah, it's been really fascinating researching this, another Newcastle female identity. As you all know, that's my favourite area of research. Thanks.
Thank you, Jude.
Yes, there's still a little fountain at Rankin Park dedicated to Ethel Byrne, yes.
Well, thanks a lot, Jude. Fantastic work. Paige, do you want to mention anything about forthcoming exhibitions or anything that's in the pipeline that you know of? Or did you want me to flash the screen around?
Yes.
There you go.
Our very own Dr. Morgan Burgess, our Special Collections Librarian, and also Katie and a few others on our team have been working on the new exhibition coming up. And I believe it's called Pen to Press, but it's about women in the book industry. So women bookbinders, women book collectors, Newcastle women writers are featured in the exhibition. So it should be a really great upcoming exhibition. So that's after Homegrown and Hunter is finished. That's coming up. And also we'll be recruiting for our Vera Deacon intern soon. So we will post that as soon as the job ad is live. We'll be posting that on.
You have to hand over the baton, Isabel.
Yeah, so that's very exciting.
All right, thank you, Paige.
Paige, I've got a lot about Newcastle women writers, of course. So if you'd like the person that's organising that to meet up with me.
Yes, well, you got us onto something hot the other day, Jude, when you came in and was talking about that unauthorized biography. And I passed that info on to Morgan, so she has your email address, and I think she's picked a lot of interesting things for the exhibition. Yeah, definitely. I'm sure she'll reach out to you about that biography as well that you were talking to me about the other day. So.
Okay.
Great. Any other updates or thoughts? Anyone?
I just noticed that Don Wilkinson from Sydney has popped something in the chat.
Yep. And Ron's got his hand up too.
Yeah, so Don has popped in the chat on the 15th of January 2028 will be the 200th anniversary of John Wyndham purchase of Darwood, on which was established the oldest vineyard in Australia, built the first Greek revival building in Australia, grazed the first purebred Hereford cattle on mainland Australia, and established the largest school of Tolstone.
Don, maybe we should put you in touch with
Julie.
Glenn Dorman, because they want to do a film on the wine industry. So, and Julie as well, obviously. They might not know about you. So, and Ron.
Just two things, Johnny. On Australia Day, the owners of the family attached to the British War Medal, which was found about 18 months ago, we are pretty sure it came out of the pool when it was being excavated, and it was picked up by a construction worker and brought up to the fort, traced to the family through Newcastle and Maitland family history groups. The initial part of the family that were told about it reckoned it was a fraud, but the wife of the fellow who came and picked it up on Australia Day, she said, no, send it to me, and she followed it through, and we were able to present it to them on Australia Day, and Mike Scanlon wrote an article that was published on Saturday in the Weekender, and I was interviewed on Friday by Paul Turton about it. In his usual comic style, he suggested if I had two people wanted it, I should cut it in half. And the other matter that I was going to mention, I'll send the date through to Anne so she can put it online. But the amphibious group who were responsible lost a whole lot of people and so on in when they were going to Stockton and to Nelson Bay and a big squall blew up. They're having an anniversary in March, which is going to be held at the fort, but I haven't got the date at home with me, so I'll send it through to Anne.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Okay, any other suggestions or thoughts?
Ron?
Don and okay, Don and then Paul.
Yep.
Thanks for that mention about the film on the wine industry. On this Friday, I'll actually be up in Colburn meeting with Ian Riggs, who's the chairman of the Bicentenary Committee for 2028. And I'll be meeting him at Coat Door, which is the first of the Wilkinson properties taken up in 1865. And it appears from research that Ian and a couple of others and myself have been doing that George Wyndham is responsible for the establishment of the wine industry at Colburn, which is something that I hadn't realised before. That it was when he noticed that the land was being opened up for subdivision in 1864 or 65, he wrote to his friend Alfred Wilkinson, my great-great-grandfather, who'd already been in Victoria and Tasmania some years before, and suggested that he come and take up land at Colburn, which he did. He arrived at the end of 1865 and immediately went up and stayed with the Wyndhams at Dulwood, and they all went, Alfred and half a dozen of his sons went across to Colburn and selected the land which became the vineyards, which were the first vineyards in Colburn. Wow. And the reason I can say Colburn is, and this is where that lovely rogue Murray Tyrrell and I used to differ. When he got the Geographic Names Board to change the boundaries, or the boundary between Rothbury and Colburn, to include his property, which was then in Rothbury and is now included in Colburn, so that he could claim that Tyrrell's had the first vineyard in Colburn. He was a lovely road, Murray. But yeah, he never was backward in looking for a good angle to improve his commercial position.
There you go. Thank you, Don.
Ron, can I have a say there, Johnny?
Yeah.
Ron, when you started speaking before, the ears of King Chester I became suddenly erect. I'm pretty sure he's thinking about banana bread, mate.
Yeah, well, Tommy got his muffin this morning.
Excellent. I'm very very pleased to hear it. The king has heard that about the muffin as well. Sorry, guys, that was a bit of an insider remark between Ron and I. We won't explain who King Chester the First and Tommy are. It would be too detailed. However, just one point. At the moment, I'm just over halfway through a new novel, and I'm creating or recreating Muswellbrook in 1942 and Newcastle, but I'd already done Newcastle previously. And I came across, there's an interesting thing that I've mentioned to Ray Kelly and a few others, but I'm interested in the connection between the Aboriginal community and in the Hunter and the Masonic Lodge, because a story came to me of an unlikely story, but Ray and I are going to have a further discussion about it, about in the 1930s, supposedly the top person in the Masonic Lodge at Muswellbrook being an Aboriginal person. And the Muswellbrook Historical Society helping me with the book, so I'll pursue it a bit more through Muswellbrook, but I'm just throwing it to the wind. If anyone knew of, has anyone ever heard that before?
That'd be a question for Dr. Bob James too.
Okay, thank you. I'll write that down. I'll chase him, but thank you.
Well, we've almost come to an end of our first meeting on a Tuesday.
It's not going to continue to be on a Tuesday,
No,
is it?
but it's been nice. I like the Tuesday vibes. What do you reckon? You've all been so
Go back
relaxed.
to Monday.
Hey, and then quiet zooming in. A long lost brother. I didn't even know where you're zooming in from. Where are you zooming in from, Guar? I've got to get going.
I'm up in Tamworth.
Tamworth. Oh.
Yeah.
All right, we'll expect you to sing a country and western song as we say farewell. Hey, I like your smile.
I'll try. It looks good, doesn't it?
Hey, look at those gnashes. You look like a rock star now, mate. All right, well, look, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. Have a think about those sorts of things, because we really want to join our community and the students into these projects. We can't promise to do everything, but we'll do as much as we can handle. But I think it's really rewarding, because you don't know who's going to be coming through and what talents they've got. But it's part of our brief and core business to be involved, legs and all, in our communities and make it a better place. So thank you very much for attending. I'll see you next week, next month. And thank you for joining us this afternoon, and be kind to one another. See you later.
Bye, guys.